the world committed to creating a global home for Muslim women in sport. The group is led by Muslim women from around the world who are actively involved in sport from various disciplines and are advancing the status and recognition of the role that Muslim women play in sport. Events such as this screening are a core part of the network's aim. So let's move to it now. Muslim women are among the least heard members of Western society and marginalized, often silenced in public discourse. And we heard that beautiful poem at the end that really kind of so articulately conveyed what that sentiment feels like. Consequently, they are also among the least understood, especially by fellow citizens who do not share the same social position, cultures, or beliefs. It is disturbing to read in the Muslim Girls Fence Project diaries of the casual and ignorant prejudice faced by the women who took part, and to listen to the voices of those teenage girls recognize that discrimination is very real and a lived experience for them. A university lecturer makes a female Muslim student the butt of humor fueled by political bias and Orientalist fantasy. Strangers question a woman wearing a hijab or a niqab about her faith and community. These men feel entitled to ask a Muslim woman to justify herself on their terms, and in doing so, enact a belief that she is, compared to them, a second-class citizen. As we've seen, Muslim Girls Fence challenges these ideas by enabling women to express themselves on their own terms, in private and through art and in public. The project invites Muslim women to meet in a space where they feel safe to discuss their unique and shared experience and create art that speaks for them. In discussing the discrimination they face, participants begin to see the importance of their experiences in bringing about change. It does that while also introducing them to the ancient art of fencing, which Maslaha has found to be an effective way to build community, challenge expectations, exercise, and have fun. In the words of British fencing's own head of participation, Virginia Bailey, this partnership with Maslaha has challenged their thinking and shifted the emphasis from the Muslim women are hard to reach to what are we doing to eliminate the barriers that sport can present. To discuss this and much more, I'd like to introduce myself and our panel today. So my name is Amna. I am not going to give you the rundown on me because I am so keen to get into the conversation. I'm just so pleased that I've been invited to chair today's discussion and to watch that beautiful film that we just all got to see. I'd like to introduce the rest of our panel members. First, I'd like to introduce Rabina Begum, also known as Bini. She is a fencer, director and coach at Youth to Legends Limited, a mother, a pediatric nurse, and one of our fencing coaches on the Muslim Girls Fence. She is based in Birmingham, has led Muslim Girls fencing sessions, and is now leading fencing clubs for youth and women. Welcome, Bini.
Thank you.
We also have Nesra, I hope I pronounced this, Nesra Wali.
Wale.
Is that correct?
Wale.
Nesra, a primary school teacher in Hamilton, New Zealand, who has been using sports as a tool for personal and community development for a number of years. Nesra teaches girls the value of sports and runs a number of programs at her school. She is a keen hiker, football, and badminton player. What kind of football?
Soccer, proper soccer.
Oh, she said proper soccer. This is controversial.
I don't mean Australian football. None of that nonsense. I mean proper soccer.
I love how you picked up on that. Professor Thorpe is an award-winning sociologist of sport and gender in Huataki. Did I say that correctly?
Huataki, Waiora.
Huataki. Thank you for correcting me. I think it's so important that we pronounce things correctly. So I'm okay with being corrected, and I think we should all be okay with being corrected. Waiora, School of Health at the University of Waikato in New Zealand. She has published close to 100 journal articles and book chapters throughout her career and continues to find much inspiration in the challenges of working across disciplines, engaging in intersectional and cross-cultural research, and collaborating with sports organisations such as HPSNZ, the IOC, Sport New Zealand, to ensure research reflects the complexities of everyday life and with real life impact. So I can see our chat thread has been flooding with comments and questions. But before I get to those and I cast my eyes on what's happening in our chat box, I want to invite our panel members to briefly reflect on the film and speak to how it resonates with your experience and some of the things that you've heard. I heard a lot of things that I've heard in my life playing sport, and I just went, wow, this is such a universal experience for Muslim women. So Bini, I invite you to start this conversation and share with us your experience and what you hear from others.
For me, watching this documentary, so to say, it's been truly inspirational. One, because how the students have felt. I myself have actually gone through the same thoughts processes of being different, and before even I actually enter any sessions to meet my participants, or whether it's a new contract and I've gone in, before they see my abilities, they see how I dress, because normally I have the niqab on and the hijab. So I'm already facing this wall that I need to actually break to get through to even do any of my lessons. So that's still a barrier that I do find myself facing even 4 years into what I've been doing. And that's something that I think if we actually use projects like this and plant a root that we, regardless of what we look like, we can still achieve whatever we put our minds to. So watching this again, I mean, I've watched it 4 or 5 times, and it just brings back that very first moment where my father gave me my sword, and he says, if you want to do fencing, if you want to do whether it was archery, because from within my family, we've always done sports that were never the norm. I mean, I never had a football or had a bike. We had a sword, or whether it was an archery bow or something. So he always put that powerful essence in us, where it doesn't matter if you're a woman, you can do what your brother's doing. If anything, you can do it better than your brother. So I always had that sort of built inside me, but in the outside world, regardless if I had that, I still had to prove myself. I had to, if I'm using the right term, disarmor myself and expose myself to actually prove that I can fence, or I can shoot an arrow. And just watching these students, and like I says, I've watched this so many times, and it just brings tears to my eyes, like they still exist. And working with Maslaha over the last few years, it's been absolutely inspirational. Their vision and their goal to help communities like ourselves to be able to reach out to fencing or any other sports, because if they feel that they can reach a sport that is not the norm, they can actually push to whether they want to do hockey, cricket. It's in my community, it's not the norm. A woman's place is always, and I see this on a daily basis, that, oh, why would she need to play football? Why did she need to do tennis? So fencing for me, I see as not only being able to fence, but to open doors to so many aspects, whether it's, if you want to go into a different type of profession. But the creative workshops that they've used, it's empowering them inside and giving them that ability not to only do sports, but to go out in life and say, yeah, it's okay to be a woman. I am powerful. I'm just as good as men. So yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. My journey with Maslaha and British fencing has been absolutely inspirational, and I've learned so much for myself and to provide something for my students.
I love hearing you remind us that it's still a society that is so dependent on the norm, and these girls and yourself have had such an unconventional experience, and whenever people are not met with convention, their immediate reaction is almost to resist. And I think one of the themes of a Muslim woman's life is the idea of the father being the person that is obstructing. And what I'm hearing you say is your father was actually your champion and the person who really believed in you. And it was the outside forces, when you enter the realm of your father telling you everything is possible, it's what lives outside of you that starts to undermine that, which is not, I think, something that we really hear in public discourse or hear through media representation of Muslim women. I'm wondering, Holly, is this something that comes through in some of your research? What sort of experiences or findings have you had through your work that we also maybe saw come through in this film?
Yeah, thanks, Hamna. It's an honour to be speaking here today, and I probably should tell the audience why I'm here. I'm co-author with Dr. Nita Ahmed of a report that we did in New Zealand. The research was really prompted after the March 15 terrorist attacks last year on the Muslim community. And we recognised that there was a huge gap both in the research and in the understanding in the sports sector in terms of how to best support Muslim girls and women in sport and active recreation. So we embarked on a 2-year project, and this was very much a cross-cultural collaboration between Nita and I. And we really tried to bring in the voices of Muslim women and girls. They were aged from 16 to 69, across a range of sports across the North Island. Nita did all of the focus groups, and that was really important in terms of our methodology. But it was also a cross-sector collaboration that was really important for us to have impact with the work. So we worked with Sport New Zealand, and I'll put the link up to the report in the chat so people can check that out if they want to. But this film speaks to so many of the themes that came through in the voices and the stories of the Muslim girls and women in New Zealand. One of the things that really, I think, really shone through from me was how comfortable the girls were to share their stories. They were so happy in that space. And something that came through in our research was the importance of safe spaces for Muslim girls and women. And for some women, that might be women-only spaces, as was in this case. But others said that was more about feeling a sense of belonging, a sense that they could be themselves. That might be, it's not just void of discrimination or the gaze, but the safe spaces came through as a really important theme in our research. And I thought in this film, clearly, these girls have found the fencing classes and the poetry a safe space for them. And I think what's really powerful too is the intersection of art with education, with the discussion, with the sport. And I think that really shows the power in cross-cultural and cross-sector collaborations, but always making sure that Muslim women are the key, they're pivotal to this. And so others like myself can be involved, but Muslim women have to be there at the table and have to be driving these initiatives. So I think that's something that was connecting for me with this film, which is incredibly beautiful and so moving.
It really was. And I think across all spheres of society, sport, rec, any other kind of social setting, safe space is not an easy thing to create. It's something we talk about. I'm sure it's something that comes through loads of research, probably around settlement, not just for minority communities. And I think oftentimes people think it's this almost intangible thing. How do you create that? And I think feeling reflected in the team that is around you, feeling represented, feeling valued, understood, they're all some of those soft things, right?
Yeah, I think one more thing that kind of connects with the previous comments was there are these stereotypes out there and these excuses when we also talk to people working in the sector, and they'd often say, oh, Muslim girls can't participate in sport because their family won't let them. that I think is actually quite a lazy excuse from the sector, because it stops them looking back on their own practice and their own programs and what can we do better to provide. And then when we talk to the Muslim girls and women, what they said was that actually we have conversations with our parents, and we're able to find sports that they're happy for us to participate in, where our barriers really are is the sports facilities and the sports programs not providing safe spaces for us where we feel welcome and a sense of belonging. So there's a really interesting disconnect between what the sector says are the barriers, what sports organisations and people working for them say are the barriers, and then what Muslim women and girls say. And I think that shows that there's a lot of work for us working in the sector, whether we're researchers or teachers or coaches or working in sports organisations. We've got a lot of work to do and a lot of listening to do, which I'll do now.
Thank you, Holly. I value you acknowledging it's a lazy excuse. That's what I'm going to tell someone next time I hear it. That's a lazy excuse, because I think that is a strong narrative around minority communities and their participation, especially Muslim girls participating in sport, that there are all these other factors. And I mean, Bini's story is probably one of millions of stories where Muslim women are supported and encouraged, but the setup is just not there, or the space is not quite right. Nessa, I'd love to hear from you about how this film resonates for you and about your experience.
I definitely connected with a girl at the start that said I didn't think sports was for me, because we've got to be honest, you don't have to be the most competitive and the most coordinated person to get involved in sports. It's about that mental well-being, somewhere where you're around people that are like you, somewhere where you're staying active, somewhere where you're communicating with other people and participating in something that you're going to enjoy. And as a teacher and an educator, that's something that I always constantly try to remind my kids. You don't have to be, it's not the Olympics when you come and join a team. And that's what I tell my kids during the lunchtime program. It's not the World Cup. We're not playing in the FIFA World Cup. We're just getting together. We're having fun. We're participating together. And in Māori terms, we have this thing, and Holly can support me as well, called whanaungatanga. And that's creating a safe space where everyone can come together and show each other mutual respect. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that happens in primary level education, because they're not at that stage where they're separating each other because of the way they look or the way they sound. They're just having fun together, and they're able to just get together through sports, which is amazing. But as an educator, I just constantly try to remind kids that you can make a space for you. If there's not people that are doing it, be that person that does it. So often when I do football on the field, some of the girls say, oh, there's too many boys, so we're not going to join in. And I say, set an example, come play with us and show other people that they can also do it with you.
You know, I love that, because one of the things the girls kept talking about in the film was sometimes the boys were the people that really put them off and said, you can't do that, girls don't do that. So what do you find is the response? Do you hear that as well?
Definitely, especially as kids get older, they go, oh, this is boys sports, or you should go play netball, that's more of a girl sport, you should just go join that teacher. And I just tell them that we all have the same body parts. There's only one significant thing that separates us. So if you can come and kick a ball, join us. It doesn't matter who's playing. And I think that's something that's really important to instill in kids while they're young. So as they get older, they don't become those boys that are in high school telling girls that they can't participate. But also identifying that there's no such thing as sports that only we can participate in. If you want to do fencing, go do fencing. If you wanted to do badminton, go for it. There's no reason to limit yourself based on the way that you look or who you think you are.
I think that was definitely something that teenage girls were saying in this film as they were being interviewed. And it's interesting because one of the insights I recall was one of the girls saying, it's not something people say overtly, and I don't think she used that specific term, but they're not saying it in an open way, but it's something you feel and you know. And that really talks to, I think, I mean, apart from brilliant insight from a very young person, just that reality of sometimes even when we're working actively on trying to change some of these underlying notions, that they're so entrenched and they're still being passed down generationally or through social media or through a way of being in society, and they're still quite dominant ideas.
Definitely.
That was something one of the young women said so powerfully was about the gay, about feeling people's eyes on her in the street, and these were mean looks, and that's something that really connects with our research, was this idea of the gaze, where Muslim girls and women said that in sporting spaces they'll feel people's eyes on them, and that makes a sense of they don't belong, they're out of place. And I think that really connected, like you say, with such insight from a very young woman. But yeah,
I would like to invite Mariam to join this conversation. Mariam, one of the things that I thought of as soon as I saw the title of this film, before I knew anything about it, was what a powerful title. And one of the questions that's come through from our audience was, could you please, could you expand on the message you want to convey, or the message you take from the title of the film? Why was this title chosen?
I think it's a lot about letting the women speak for themselves, or the young girls speak for themselves. I think we see in the movie the reason why we have the creative and the sports together is because it lets them speak for themselves, and they don't just become a symbol for other people to talk about. I think that's the main message I get from the title myself. But yeah, I was also just thinking about what you guys were all saying, and it's a lot about how all these power dynamics kind of exist in the world that we all live in, and how when we're creating that space for young women, we try to not reproduce any of those power dynamics. So the safety is about them seeing us there, but it's also that we know these things exist and we're going to stop them from entering the space as much as we can. So making that commitment to keep all the harmful things out of the space. And I think without that commitment, you can end up bringing stuff in, because you're also human who lives in the structures. So yeah, that's a big part of it.
I imagine that would have been quite challenging. I'm wondering what some of the cultural barriers were present when you were trying to make this film, if any, or were there other barriers that you didn't really anticipate? So
I actually wasn't working with Maslaha while the film was made, so I probably am not the best person to answer that question. But yeah, I want to know kind of what the person meant when they said cultural barriers.
Because I'm not really sure. That question came through from an audience member. I mean, one of the things I noticed when I was listening to the girls was up until, I was writing notes when I was watching the film. So up until Hafsa's mum came on, I think her name was Kasha, I didn't see any parents present. Was that deliberate? Was that about maintaining the voices of the young people? Or was that because parents weren't really willing to be involved and be voices? Like they were happy to support their kids, but didn't want to be at the forefront of a conversation like this? I
think because the project is for Muslim girls, it's in a school as well, so it would have been just the girls present in the space. It makes sense for them to be at the center of it. And just logistically, it would have been hard to get loads of parents in and to film. So I think for those reasons, that's the reasons why the parents are not at the forefront, because it is a project for the young girls. And we wouldn't want to take that away from them.
I have an appreciation for the level of thought there. One of the things that came through quite strongly in the film was talking about sexism, racism, Islamophobia. And one of the questions that's come through is, how do you increase awareness? It seems so common sense to all of us. Like, we're talking in a knowing way. That's coming through the research. It's happening in our lived experience. But how do you raise the awareness to people who are not in sports about these intersectional issues, the discrimination and the lived experience, who kind of don't really have a clue?
Is that to me or to all of us?
Whoever wants to, Nesra, Bini, Holly.
I think representation is important, but also you don't have to be the spokesperson, which is me contradicting myself as I say it. But I feel like when you're a Muslim person, you are that voice, you do represent. And as a teacher, just being a Muslim Black teacher, the amount of kids that come up to me and they're like, whoa, you're a teacher? How did you do that? And I said, just like you, I learned the language and now I'm able to do it. So when we go into these spaces, we just represent by being who we are, by bringing our true selves. But at the same time, that doesn't mean every time that somebody has a question about protocol that you're the person that needs to answer it. but just by being there, you can just be that person that inspires.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You echo that sentiment, Binny?
Yes, I do totally agree with that, because from what I've experienced, having Muslim girls come to me to be taught fencing or just have that safe space, I think they find comfort in, if I can do something like this, wearing what I wear, there is hope for them. So it's like, when you have a final sort of product and you think, well, if she could do it, I could do it regardless of what I look like. So I think, yeah, it's really important to have that kind of that forefront, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the visibility. So it's like,
Yeah.
we can be visible, and there can be role models and people doing it and showing you it's possible. And we saw that in the film when they saw Ibtihaj Muhammad. I actually teared up, because you could just see how impactful that was for them. But then she doesn't have to be it, and she doesn't have to be the person, as you're saying, Nasra. And it's the balance, I guess, of being able to acknowledge that representation is essential, and there needs to be that visibility, but also we don't have to carry that burden on our shoulders. Like, I'm it, so I have to speak for everybody. And I can see that might actually be a trap that someone could fall into and feel suffocated and burdened by that responsibility.
Absolutely.
One of the things we mentioned earlier, I want to go in terms of delving deeper into that representation and increasing the awareness in the public realm. I guess we spoke earlier, Holly, you called it a lazy excuse. When people make lazy excuses, one of the questions that's come through is, how do you engage members of the Muslim community and their families, and what considerations need to be made by sporting organizations when creating physical activity programs for specific cohorts to ensure their long-term engagement? And I guess a lot of codes might be, or organizations, clubs might be saying, we want to get it right. So, are there any tips or strategies that you would suggest to this audience member?
Yeah, so in our report, we have a list of recommendations there, and we also have a page of reflection questions, because we think anyone working in the sector or out even in society, it's good. Often people have sort of a one-dimensional stereotypical view of Muslim women, as as some of the things the girls said and in the poetry and some of the speakers have already mentioned. And that is so far from reality in terms of we had a symposium in New Zealand, and we had multiple panels with multiple Muslim women speaking on these panels, and the audience, which was both parents from the Muslim community, but also the sports sector. And the sports sector was just leaning in. It was just blowing their minds in terms of the many ways of being a Muslim woman. And I think asking ourselves some critical questions about what are some of our assumptions and where have these assumptions come from. And then once we start unpacking some of that, it's about educating ourselves. And that shouldn't always be put on Muslim women themselves, because as people have noted in the comments in the panel, that's exhausting. So actually we need to do that work. We need to educate ourselves if we're out there working in the sports sector. And some of the things that we heard in our research was, lots of people know that women in sport get a hard time. It's hard being a woman in sport. But for the Muslim women in our research, they said I'm not just a woman, but I'm also, I'm often, not always, but I'm a brown woman, then I cover or I don't, but I have gender, I have ethnicity, I have religion, there's culture, these all intersect in really different ways for different women. So we just, in our report, we talk about sports organizations needing to invest and prioritize cultural education programs. They're looking at their policies to see where there's places in their policies that can be more inclusive. making sure Muslim women are part of the conversation, because if you are trying to provide for those communities, there is knowledge and expertise in those communities. You just have to find the right ways to open up that conversation. So yeah, there's lots of things we can be doing.
And you know what? I think sometimes the information is right at our fingertips. So I'm going to put the onus back on that question, that audience member, and anyone else who's sitting with that question. Read the report, check out the reflection questions, because I imagine it would be a great resource for them. And if I'm correct, you already dropped it in the comment section, right, Holly?
Yeah, I did.
Awesome. I want to ask Bini and Nesra and Mariam, on the flip side, one of the audience members is asking, so, you know, there's people coming from the outside looking in, but sometimes even within communities, there are real challenges. And I guess for Muslim women, it's balancing the stereotypes that exist outside, and then it's also within our communities or family structures, dealing with some of the limitations placed on Muslim women or girls from within those family units and communities. So can you give some feedback on how to encourage parents, relatives, religious focal points of communities to embrace girls and women in sports and to let go of some of the things we heard in that documentary come through?
Sorry, do you want me to start?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Firstly, the question that you've asked is absolutely valid in terms of it comes from both left and right, whether you will experience it outside, but you will most definitely experience it from within your own community. I myself, when I became a fencer, this wasn't directly from my family. I was exposed to, you know, people are going to see you as a ninja, they're going to see you as a terrorist. This wasn't, and if I'm using the right term, the outer community, you know, the white sort of belief, it was internal. So before I even stepped outside that door, I was already on my plate. You know, I had, oh, you're going to be seen as Osama bin Laden's wife, you know, things like that. So if I've already got this from my own community, my own brown Muslim practicing community, I felt, okay, what am I going to do outside? Is this actually how they're going to see me? You know, if people that know me, they've grown up with me, or they've sat at the same table with me, they've ate with me, this is how they can actually mock, or if they even think it's a joke, this is what I'll be faced with outside. And it was my older brother that just sat me down and said, basically, you know, is this who you are? Do you think you represent what they've put on your plate? And the answer was no. So he said, well, just pick yourself up and go. If you face this from the outside community, then yes, okay, we can actually educate them. But if you experiencing this from within the community, open up a lesson, show them what you can do. But you know, I can always sit here and blame, yeah, it's society, but it's always, it works from both. You have to balance both. So you have to teach your own community, and then you can teach the outside community. Because if you stand alone and your community is not standing with you, then it's one of those battles that you're going to find really hard to sort of push out there. So yeah, it was there's this one prime example that I still have that fear inside me. There was a project that I did with Maslaha, and there was one image that one of the photography sessions that we did, and for me that was a norm. You know, having a niqab on, having a all covered up and sword fighting, that was a norm. I never saw that as an issue. But when I actually seen it in my hand, I thought, well, my community is going to think you're representing us, and what are you portraying? So it was the guidance and, you know, the encouragement of like my colleagues that says to me, you know what, if this is you, and you know who you are, put it out there. And I did. I allowed it, and it brought in so much encouragement from the outside community, the white community. They saw that as a powerful image. And if I wasn't working with Maslaha or this type of project, I probably would have kept that at the back of the shelf, thinking, yeah, that's fine for me because I know who I am, but I don't want to put that out to the world because they will see me as a terrorist, so to say. So it's really important to educate both, because that's when you are going to actually get a result.
I think also, just jumping on that, you realize that those are not two separate realms. Actually, it's not the outside world and then our inside world. It's that patriarchy and racism, and also for Muslim communities, the fear of how we're going to be seen, or what people are going to think, or any backlash that comes from racism, and that comes from patriarchy. So it's the same issue, but it's been internalized.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, like, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily our fault. I think it's definitely those forces that have just permeated everything that we're still struggling with when we express ourselves. Yeah,
I agree with you, Mariam, because when you've experienced that through life, and with the social media always promoting so much negativity, then it becomes a norm. It's it's like, this is what we're going to be faced with. This is how you're going to be seen. So I do agree with you there, but at the same time, it's really important to educate both sides.
I think sometimes we become our own biggest critics. Before something horrible happens, we think of all the bad things that are going to be said. I remember as soon as the Christchurch attack happened, the first thought any of me and my colleagues had is like, I hope it's not a Muslim person. I hope it's not a Muslim person. Because we're so used to being on that side of whatever happens. So I think, especially being Somali, when it comes to women in sport, there's this barrier of, they're just going to start mixing with the wrong crowd, and it's just going to lead to trouble. And what I always do is come sit down, have a talk, tell somebody what all your problems are, what concerns you have, and let's talk through it rather than just shutting it down straight away. Because if you have a concern and something that you're worried about, the best way is just to educate yourself. What's your concern? The uniform? Okay, I'll walk you through how the uniform is going to look. I'll show you how they're going to play their games. I'll show you, if it's transportation, we can organize someone Muslim to pick up the kids. We can organize someone that you trust. But rather than just shutting down your kids' aspiration and hopes compared to basing on some kind of fear that you have at the back of your head, is not fair. It's not fair on them. And I think as parents, we want our kids to flourish. We want them to do the best they can. We want them to enjoy life.
Yeah. And
I'm just going to say this, I think of like both you and Binny, as like the sports deliverer or the facilitator, you are there to tell the parent, I'm going to take their needs into account. They don't have to wear they don't have to wear the traditional clothing. They can wear what they want. So you're altering the space for them in mind. If more sports generally did that, there would be a different idea of it then, of engaging with it. It wouldn't be a space of fear for a lot of parents, because they see that it's adapting to what people need.
Right. Most of the parents, I don't know what Muslim people and their fear of pork is. Every time I take any of the kids to the game, they're like, are they going to be fed pork in any of their warm-ups or any of their activities? And I'm like, no, for the love of God, everybody knows what halal is. It's 2020. And that's always the biggest fear. And I find that absolutely hilarious. They're like, what are the snacks going to be? I'm like, nothing that contains anything haram. It's okay. Your kid will come back inside.
You know what I hear when you say that? I hear the unrealistic fear.
Fear, right? Just ideology that's coming out of nowhere, and it's like, you need to relax a bit and just trust that your kids can be like, oh yeah, I won't need that.
But on the other side of that is sports organisations in Aotearoa, New Zealand anyway, are very hesitant to change the way they've done things for so long. Netball, for example, which is the most popular sport for girls and women in New Zealand, are very hesitant to give up the skirt, despite many women, not just Muslim women, many women not feeling comfortable with that, saying, look, we want to play netball, but can we wear something else? Can we wear more modest clothing? Or, providing halal food or prayer spaces. It's not super hard work, but it's just thinking outside the box. And some sports organisations have for a long time been set in doing things this way for so long, and still so many sports organisations, their boards are predominantly white men, and if we're lucky, one white woman. So no wonder those decisions are still getting made like that, unfortunately.
And it's interesting because really at the heart of it is change. We're so comfortable with what we think and believe and the system that we don't want to disrupt the status quo. And it doesn't matter, it seems, if it's within our families and communities or within a bigger corporate structure. People are going, wait, what, why? Just leave it, leave it as it is.
But at the same time, the rhetoric is all about cultural diversity and inclusion. We're doing this, we need to do this, and at the grassroots level, that's not what's being lived and felt and experienced. So yeah.
And look, I'm so sad to tell our audience and all of you that we've actually, I don't know how, but we're at time. And this conversation could honestly go for an hour and I wouldn't fill the time, because I think really sport is something, it's a language that is universally understood. It's a way for people to connect. And clearly for the participants in this brilliant program, it was a way for them to discover their voices and their skills and find, I mean, the beauty of art and sport together, to find something that helps them make sense of the world that they live in, to build their skills and strengthen that voice. I hope that this film, Nobody's Metaphor, becomes a standard globally for people to tell more stories like this, so we see that representation come through, and there isn't just one Ibtihaj Muhammad and one Bini, that there's them multiplied, and we start to see that as the norm. And through people who understand how you take anecdotally what that experience is, that can convert and translate some of the data to those bigger organizations about, well, this is how you can do it a little bit better, and the change starts to happen at multiple levels. Ultimately, I think sometimes people feel really perplexed by inequality, especially systemic inequality like racism or the patriarchy. It's like, what do we do to disrupt that, Mariam? And I think there are really big questions. But what I think everyone saw through this film is that we are focused on enabling one person at a time, and that we can all contribute in a meaningful way to our local community, our local sports club, and have a direct impact on someone. And until we figure out some of those systemic issues, that's just going to be the way that we keep tackling some of these big issues. I want to thank all of you for joining. I think now more than ever, it's vital that partnerships and projects like this exist in the sector. So I hope this short film has sparked something for you. It definitely has for me. It really spoke to something deep in me. And I will be making sure all of my friends and all of our sports network are watching Nobody's Metaphor, because I think they can really take a lot away from it. As Suhaima Manzoor said at the end of this film, these Muslim girls are aspiring world changers. They're justice bringers and fighters, because they know the rules and how they are tilted the wrong way. And they truly are nobody's metaphor. For those of you who are heading off to bed, I hope you have a good night. For those of you starting your day, I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much for joining the conversation, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.